You're listening to the Red Eye Hour.
Welcome everybody to the Red Eye Hour. This is your host, JMeeks. How's everybody doing out there tonight? Let me tell you, it is the Red Eye Hour. This is about 2:23 a.m. in the morning. So, this is going to be the first audio podcast. It's going to be called the Red Eye Hours Solo Stories Part 1. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to be telling a lot of weird, mysterious stories, unsolved mysteries, I guess horror, ghost stories, and just weird, urban myths in general. We don't know if they're real or not. I've been a big fan of horror since I could pretty much walk. My dad was a big Stephen King fan, and I've been watching horror movies for a long time, and it's something that I've watched literally a million documentaries on. And so we're going to get into it, and this is one that's been covered a lot on the internet. So I know you guys have heard about it before, at least. And the story we're going to be talking about tonight is the Russian sleep experiment story. Now, this is all set in Russian Soviet era, which if some of you don't know, it's during the World War II era, so it's in the 1940s. And this was in a covert test facility in Russia, very secretive. It was a military sanctioned experiment, right? So they chose 5 prisoners of war, and they told them that if they participated in a sleep study, which, lots of sleep studies still go on to this day, right? They just didn't know what kind of sleep study it was going to be. But anyway, told these 5 prisoners of war, if you do this experiment, it's for 30 days. We provide you a cot, we provide you food, we provide you a toilet and a sink and running water and books to read. So, if you can last 30 days, you'll have your freedom. You can go home to your families. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. So they went and they got, everything was explained to them, and they come and they were going to be sealed into this gas chamber, and continuously it would leak out stimulant gas. And it was an experimental stimulant gas. Now that's the part you can't find a lot of information on, what kind of gas was it? What were the chemical compounds that were in that gas that they were putting through the vents of this chamber that these 5 prisoners of war were staying in, right? We don't know. Obviously, in my opinion, it must have had some kind of amphetamine in it, because it was a test to see what would happen if they stayed up for long periods of time without sleeping. That's what the whole experiment was about. So, they're in there. There's these big, round, 5-inch thick, portal bubbles with their windows that you could see through. And that's what the doctors and the scientists and the researchers could look through to analyze their behavior and take their notes and see how they're acting, what kind of conversations they're having. Are they eating? Are they trying to sleep? Are they drinking? All the things that today behavioral health people would be taking notes on and observing, on how these people are acting. So they didn't have, CCTVs back then or anything like that. They did have an intercom system and a very basic recording system, so they could always hear what was going on inside the chamber. And if they needed to make announcements, they could make announcements through the intercom system. So, the first 3 or 4 days go by. Everything seems pretty normal. There's not really any odd behaviors. No one's sick. It's all okay. All pretty normal. Until we get into day about 4 into 5. Things start to get pretty weird. So, the researchers, they had noticed the changes in conversation between the subjects that were in the chamber. Started to segregate themselves a little bit, not too much, but a couple of people started hanging out by themselves, or kind of segregating into groups, and they started having lots of conversations between the groups instead of all with each other, in the beginning. it was starting to segregate, starting to divide, you could tell, and they weren't sure why. And the small talk they were having went from like pretty normal things about their families and wishing they could get back home, and about recent events, which in that time would have been like the war and all the things that were going on around the world during that time. That would have been a pretty crazy time for people. So those talks turned into more darker topics. They started talking about trauma from their past life, negative experiences that they've had in their lives, and how it's affected them into adulthood. And that's the kind of conversations they started having. Day 5. So now the subjects have started to complain about being in the chamber. They're like, we don't want to be in here. Like, this is hell. Like, we're starting to it's just not good. But as the doctors and scientists and researchers looked on, I guess that was all a part of the plan, and they're like, sorry, it's for 30 days, and but we'll take note of it, and we hear you, but that's not a part of the plan. So we get around to day 6, and subjects stopped talking to each other altogether. Now they're all like in their own corners. Very increased paranoia had set in, like very extreme. They also started like whispering to themselves and talking low and thinking other people were talking to them. And, you could just tell that they were going into psychosis. They've been up for 5 days. Like anybody would. Plus you have a stimulant gas being pumped into a gas chamber. Like you can't get out, and you're being watched like a lab rat. How crazy would that be? So day 7 comes along, and the subjects, they start thinking that they could sell out their buddies in the room with them, so they would get up really close to like the microphones and to the windows, and they'd be like whispering stuff, and the doctors and scientists and researchers would be like trying to listen, really trying to hear what he was saying, but it didn't make any sense. There was a lot of disorganized thinking, and they were just like whispering, and it was just a lot of paranoid thoughts. And they thought if I told on my buddy over here in the chamber, well, they'll let me out and give me my freedom. But when they signed up for it, doctors didn't have that in mind, so that wasn't going to happen. So they're just really they're watching them. They're starting to notice all these different behaviors now. It's starting to get pretty weird. And so now we skip a couple days after that. So they're like at day 9. And things take a turn for the worst. One of the men had started screaming and just running back and forth between the walls, screaming at the top of his lungs, like screaming like he was being killed. And while he's doing this, they're watching. They said he did it for approximately over like 3 hours at the top of his lungs, never stopping, hardly ever even seemed like he was taking a breath, just screaming at the top of his lungs. Not only was that horrifying, weird part about it was that the other subjects in the room didn't even act like it was happening. That's what was creepy. So everyone's segregated. They're all muttering to themselves. They're all whispering. They're definitely showing significant signs of sleep deprivation. Researchers found out that they had the guy that was screaming, and they didn't find this out until later, that he actually tore his vocal cords from screaming so much, and then that sound kind of turned into like this weird squeaking sound that it kept making the entire time. So you got that going on in the background. No sleep, we're getting to day 9, day 10, like it's rough in there, So the other subjects start ripping the pages out of the books that were supplied for them in there for them to read. They start tearing out the pages of the books, just all over the place. Some were taking them and like stuffing them in the toilet or getting them wet under the sink. Some were defecating on the papers, and they're like making this paste with the water and getting all the pages wet, and then they're sticking it onto those portal windows that the doctors and the scientists and the researchers have been watching them through the whole time and taking their notes and about the whole experiment. The subjects put paper up so they couldn't see in anymore, couldn't see anything. So that was interesting. So we have, human waste on the papers. They've put them in the water. Like, so I'm sure it's on the walls, it's on their hands. I mean, getting weird. So the view was obscured, and it had become silent in the chamber after they had done this. It became silent. And 3 days had went by with complete silence after this happened. And they were thinking, my God, are they all dead? But they had an oxygen sensor, like an O2 sensor hooked up to this chamber, and they could tell that it was being used. So that gave them the indication, well, they have to be alive because the oxygen is being used in the room. But the subjects just weren't speaking, they weren't making any noise. And the silence itself was frightening. So, like I said, about 3 days had gone by, so we're getting close to like day 13 now. The researchers are discovering and discussing like what to do next, And they continued to monitor the O2 levels in the chamber, the consumption, so they knew they were alive, like I explained. And they thought maybe like the microphones were broken, but no subjects were making sounds, and they couldn't see in, and it was just a weird situation to be in. So they decided to use the intercom system that I had talked about earlier, and they were going to talk inside to them and see if they would respond. They used the intercom system, and they talked in there, and they said, hey, we're checking on you guys. Is everyone okay? We can't see in. We haven't heard any noises for a long time. We're thinking about coming in the chamber, and if we decide to come in, you need to stay away from the door, and you need to lay down on your stomachs, and if not, you'll be shot on sight. So they're saying these instructions to the subjects and talking into the intercom system. Then all of a sudden, in this very terrifying, calm, clear, like weird, almost possessed sounding voice, this person says,
"We no longer want to be free."
So that sent shivers down the doctors and researchers and scientists' spines. They're like, what? So after this, they decided not to go in the chamber. That kind of freaked them out because obviously the subjects are still alive. Yes, they're experiencing severe hallucinations and paranoia and all these things related to sleep deprivation, but that's a part of the study. So these Russians weren't they're tough, man. They're not gonna give in too easily. So then day 15 comes, and they finally decided, because of all the things that have happened, that we probably shouldn't really go to day 30. Because it's getting pretty weird in there and getting pretty rough. So day 15, they flushed the room of the stimulant that has been constantly being leaked into this chamber, this chemical stimulant that they had been using. So once this starts, the subjects inside start screaming and pleading and begging the doctors and the scientists to please turn back on the gas. Like, we'll do whatever you want, just turn the gas back on. So, they use the intercom system again, the doctors and scientists do, and tell everybody, okay, we have flushed the room with the gas and pumped in fresh O2. And the subjects are still screaming. They're not even listening to the instructions. And they say, and we're going to open the doors and we're going to come in and we're going to, medically look at everyone. And if anybody needs medical treatment, we'll take them to it. There's also, Russian soldiers here for our safety. So lay on the ground when we open the door and, don't move at us in any aggressive fashion or you'll be shot on sight, like Russians do. They're pretty badass. So they open the door. And this is the first time that they've even been able to see into the chamber since like day 10 when the subjects, used the papers out of the books and flooded it with paper and fecal matter and put it all over the window. So they haven't even been able to see it. So they don't know what they're about to see. So they open the doors and the reports from the doctors and the scientists and the researchers that worked there said that it was straight out of a horror movie. So 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive. The one that had died, they had observed that he had patches of skin ripped from his chest, like big portions of it, and his legs. And they had took those pieces of flesh, and some chewed on them and ate them, and then some also used them along with paper from the books and jammed them into the water drains in the chamber, and then like the drain of the sink, and used skin and the books of the paper to clog the toilet, and then they flooded the chamber with about 4 inches of water. Now you gotta imagine, this water has fecal matter in it, just dirty from the people and the facilities, I'm assuming. It had body fluids in it, waste, blood. I mean, nasty, nasty water that these people had been living in for days. The other subjects also had pieces of flesh ripped off their body in random different places. Some, were off their head or their back or their chest or their stomach or their legs or their lower legs. Some even had the fingers, skin ripped off like their fingers, and like their bones were showing. Their bones were showing on their hands. So scientists later determined that it was all self-inflicted. They didn't do it to each other. It wasn't from biting, or it wasn't from like teeth marks where you could see the rip in the flesh. It was done like by their own hands and just eating their own flesh. Even though there was food provided for 30 days. This is what happened after being awake for so many days and losing their minds. So, the food that was provided for the 30 days, like I said, had not been touched. Not any of it. It was still there. And the subject's mind state was so bad that they were eating their own flesh. They're, doing odd behavior, hallucinating, paranoid delusions, all that kind of stuff. And the subjects continued to beg for the gas to be turned on. And the scientists and researchers had to bring in the soldiers to extract them from the chamber because they just weren't following commands and like coming out and going with the doctors and everybody. They refused to come out and they just begged for this gas to be turned back on. So the soldiers show up and they're like, trying to say, hey guys, with a little more force, it's over, let's go. So you guys can get help. So some of the subjects were so aggressive and they fought back. And one of the subjects bit the soldier on the neck and then also ripped off his testicles and he bled to death, one of the soldiers. And I guess it happened like quick. They couldn't even it happened so fast that they weren't even able to get any shots off, right? So that's crazy, and that soldier died. So another subject during the altercation had ruptured his spleen. Why they were like, being physical with the subjects and trying to get them out, and they were so skinny and so emancipated, the scientist said, that like not only could you see their ribs if they weren't wearing a shirt, you could almost see where the organs were like sticking out through what thin layer of skin they had left, almost like skeleton corpse status, but they're alive. You know what I mean? So that subject died. So we got 2 dead subjects overall, which means we got 3 alive and 1 dead soldier. So one of the other subjects dies as well. And one of the scientists, one of the doctors was one that actually killed one of the subjects because he picked up the gun from the dead soldier, and the subject was like coming out of the chamber, but in this very aggressive manner. And the doctor looked at him, and this is what reported now, and you're not going to hear this like on every version of this story. This is stuff I have found by researching and reading and looking up. He says, "I just want to know what you are before I kill you," is what the doctor said. And he said that the subject looked at him, and it was like it was peering into his soul. And he says,
I am you. I am the darkness that lives inside you. And I'm with you all the time. I'm there, and I watch you when you sleep. And I watch you when you wake, and I'll watch you. And I'll be there like when you die.
some crazy shit like that, right? And it scared the scientist, and he's like taking step backs as the subject is saying this, and then after he said it, the doctor ended up shooting him fatally and killing him. But that's what that guy said that came out of his mouth. And I might not be like 100% exact on those words, but pretty damn close. Like, pretty damn close. That's what he said to that guy. Definitely pretty disturbing and traumatizing for the doctor, you know? So the two subjects. So they get them on the gurneys, they get them to the medical wing of this covert military facility so they can, provide medical aid, right? So they're trying to give the subject a sedative that'll, calm him down, and they've gave it to him, and it has absolutely no effect on him. And he's still begging that he wants to go back to the chamber and wants the gas on. Like, still, after all this time, like, he's still begging. And they supposedly gave him, there's reports from like 3 amounts to 10 times the amount of sedatives. I doubt it's the 10 times amount that would kill somebody. But I'm guessing definitely probably double or triple the dose for a normal person. And it just seemed to have no effect. So finally, when they were giving him the anesthetic, he fought the med staff so much, and he was pleading with them and telling them he must stay awake. He must stay awake. He cannot go to sleep. It is in peril that he not go to sleep. And in his struggle, he's actually able to tear one of the leather wristbands that were like the leather straps that were being used to like hold him down, and they had to get a new one. So finally, after administering the anesthetic for the surgery, just after a few minutes, he did die when he fell asleep. So that was pretty crazy. So the last survivor, which is this guy at the vocal cords, he had died as well during the whole thing. Some say he died in the chamber and was shot. Some say that he also died by getting the anesthetic and that he passed away. There's 2 different versions to that. But the last survivor, the Russians decided to put him back in the chamber. And being at this point, they did this to keep him alive, because they had just witnessed the other subjects die from when they finally went to sleep, and kind of believing what they were saying, if we go to sleep, we'll die. Now you must be thinking, has to do something with the gas. It's obviously changed something in them, or they're just totally so whacked out of their mind that I don't know. They manifested that if they went to sleep they would die, or I don't know, or it's probably just a reaction from the gas. You know what I'm saying? Like a negative side effect. And from what they went through, like anyway. So last Friday, they put it back in the chamber. And they did this to keep him alive at this point. And before entering, they put an EEG on him, so they could like monitor some of like his brain waves and stuff. That's what they're interested in, and read his readouts and that. So the doctors and scientists would watch, and they would watch as all of a sudden they would like flatline sometimes, and then they would spike back up. And so by watching it, they finally realized that every time he closed his eyes, which he was actually like going into a quick sleep, he was like nodding off, right? The EEG would like flatline. There would be no reading. It was super weird. And it was like they described in these documents like he was having a micro brain death over and over again. Pretty crazy stuff. So, before they even turned the gas back on in the chamber for the last subject, because he was already dozing, he did actually more than doze, and he actually fell into a sleep, and he passed away. So all the subjects have passed away. The doctors and scientists were trying to figure out, was it the gas, was it the sleep deprivation, was it a mixture of the two? Of course it was a mixture of the two, man. You can't put people through that and expect to have a good turnout. That's horrible, man. And that's just my opinion. And, during this time frame, during the Soviet era in the world, during the 1940s, we had World War II going on. There's already horrible experience being done on humans all around the world. I mean, you have Unit 731, which is a Japanese thing. Look that up sometime. You need to have a strong stomach and be used to some sick shit, because that's some weird stuff they did on humans. I mean, look at the German Nazi concentration camps. Look at the medical experiments that we did on humans there. I mean, absolutely horrendous. Japanese kamikazes, we know that they were giving them amphetamines to get all jacked up and to basically be a suicide bomber like we have today. It was just in a, jet. But back in those days, how crazy would that have been? We know they gave amphetamines to the German Nazi soldiers so they could, march longer and stay awake and stay focused. And, so yeah, there was crazy human rights being violated and crazy human experiences happening in the world during that time. So of course the Russians were on that same bus, trying to figure out like, hey, this is what they're doing. Let's see if we can try something. Maybe we can make it better, but it turned out horribly wrong. And sleep deprivation is also a subject that's still being studied today. I think it's somewhere around like 18 days is the actual scientifically, medically recorded that someone has stayed awake until they die. Now, some people might argue with me with that on the internet and be like, nah, man, it's way longer. I knew this fucking tweaker Joe that fucking stayed awake for 30 days, man. Well, whatever, okay? I'm telling you, in a medical journal, 18 days is what's recorded as someone that could stay awake and before they passed away. Even Navy SEALs, they say Navy SEALs when they go through Hell Week, and I'm not a Navy SEAL or anything, this is just what I know. I do know some Navy SEALs and I've talked to some, but they go through Hell Week, and during Hell Week, during that week, they get a total of those 7 days, a total of 4 hours of sleep. So they said, yeah, hallucinations were very common, and definitely your thinking is not the same, and it affects everybody different. Not everybody can handle that shit. That's ways that they weed them out. So, and they're doing that today. So yeah, a Russian sleep experiment in the Soviet era. Because some people say the story could possibly completely not be true at all, and it might be. Maybe it's just a really good urban myth story. But there's also a lot of things out there that kind of point to like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it might have happened. Like, it's definitely like pretty possible that shit happened. So yeah, guys, that's the end of the story. That's the end of the first Red Eye Hour solo story, part 1. I hope you guys liked it. Please make some comments. Like I said, I don't claim to be an expert on any of this stuff, so don't kill me in the comments with, like, oh, you're totally wrong about this and totally wrong about that. I did do some pretty significant research, and I do on all my stuff. So yeah, I hope you liked it, everybody. Thanks for staying up with me, and thank you again. Thank you for coming to the Red Eye Hour. Please subscribe. We need subscribers. Hit that like button if you liked it. And Solo Stories Part 2 is going to be coming out very soon. So just stay tuned. And I hope you guys enjoyed it once again. And we will talk to you later. Goodbye, guys.